Welcome to Small Spark Theory. This podcast is designed as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and practical tips on using marginal gains to help your agency new business endeavours. Small Spark Theory is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann of Gunpowder Consulting. Welcome back to Small Spark Theory. You may have noticed, if you're a regular listener, that we've taken a couple of episodes where we've spoken to marketeers. So we've crossed the other side of the fence and asked some opinions from marketing directors and creative service managers of different brands to try and get an insight into how they work with agencies and how agencies can perform better, whether that's in new business scenarios or in the kind of ongoing client agency relationship. And I'm really pleased to be able to have with me today a brilliant person. I've had the pleasure of working with her, and somebody that's got some real insight, having worked both client side, spent some time working with agencies and running pitches, and then is back working client side again. So I'm delighted to welcome today Julia Howe. Julia is EVP and co-head of global marketing at 20th Century Fox, and joining us all the way from Los Angeles. Hi, Julia.
Good morning, Lucy, or good evening.
Oh, good morning. It's 4:00 in the afternoon here. It's a Friday. It's been a very warm week here. How's the weather over there?
I understand it's hotter there than it is here.
Wow, what times we're living in. Now, I'm really pleased that you could do this. Hopefully the wonders of technology mean that the sound is going to be okay for our listeners, but we'll just give this a go and see. I'd be really interested for our listeners if you could tell us a bit about, because I know you've had a really varied career. Tell us a bit about your career up until now and what got you to this role at 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, it has been pretty varied, actually, and I've lived in a few countries along the way, probably Los Angeles being the most foreign, even though I have lived in France and Spain along the way. So, no, I mean, I started my career back in London, and I was lucky enough to start working in the entertainment industry, and specifically the home entertainment industry, really in the heyday of DVD and DVDs in 1996. And I was lucky enough to just get a first break by applying for an ad in Marketing Week at the time. So I spent about 9 years in total in home entertainment in London, then in Paris, working for Fox and Universal. And then after about 9 years, I just wanted a change. And so I jumped ship and jumped to the agency side and spent 6 years at a London brand agency at the time called Branded, who were then bought by the Lowy Group, which is where I met you. And I was really there working on brand strategy for a whole range of clients. And then towards the end, I got involved with the Lowy Group on pitching and was running pitches across Branded and some of the other agencies, creative and design agencies within the Lowy Group. I had a quick stint after that, 2 years as marketing director internationally for the Associated Press. So I went B2B, client side, but B2B marketing. So a bit of a change. And then after that, in 2013, I moved to the US. I ended up back at Fox working with a lot of the colleagues that I'd had the first time around in 1996. So there was a lesson there about not pissing anyone off when you're early on in your career, because I'm back with them all again now. And so, so I jumped into a head of marketing for all their feature film movies. It was a domestic role to start with, and then after a couple of years became global. And then 2.5 years ago, I was promoted, and I'm now co-head of marketing for Fox. We run all the global marketing for all of the home entertainment campaigns. So we're basically responsible for any movies and TV shows that come out on DVD, on Blu-ray, and all digital sales and rentals. So it's about $1.75 billion in revenue annually, globally, coming off that part of the business. So the sort of home end business essentially sort of generates a lot of the profit that then finances new movies. We've got about 100 people in marketing, and we sort of have a core brand team which sort of run the strategy. And then we have creative, comms, publicity, digital, social, and media. Although we have in-house people, we're working with agencies on every single campaign. We rely heavily on our agencies, even to do some of the ideation. Our approach is really, on any given title, is really to challenge our team to sort of creatively take risks and to try new things. I think we're lucky enough to work in entertainment. Every time we have a different property, different content, and really exciting content. And so there's no reason at all why the team shouldn't be coming up with new ideas, working with new platforms, and really trying to push the boat. So that's a very brief summary. I guess the final thing to say is, personally, I mean, I'm in a moment of great transition because Disney finally, after a year and a half of planning, bought Fox on March the 20th. And so currently in a slightly different stage of my career, managing a marketing team through change. So we're in a period of great transition.
Wow, I can imagine you've got your hands full. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this for us when I'm sure you've got huge demands on your time. But the reason I wanted to speak to you and get you to chat for our listeners is you've got quite unique experience, because as you said, you've spanned both consumer and B2B, but also client and agency. So you've seen both sides of not only the kind of the new business coin, but also the ongoing client relationship bit.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether, through your experience, be it with Fox or with AP, if there are particular examples of agency approaches or pitches that really stood out for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I obviously did a bit of thinking about this in order to prepare. So, interestingly, in the last 2 years, my team have been through 2 different pitch processes. In both cases, it was for a different type of retained digital agency. The first one was just a digital agency to be retained to work on all of our campaigns throughout the year. And then the second pitch was for a specific agency to run what we were terming always on marketing. So that was really sort of monitoring the news and really keeping our movies, our catalogue, not our new release movies so much, but our catalogue of movies front and centre, throughout the year. Because our biggest competitor would be a streaming service like a Netflix, who seem to do a very good job of always staying relevant and always pointing to when good movies to watch. So we wanted a digital agency that was, really doing creative stuff in always on. I attended most of those pitches, and we probably saw 4 to 5 agencies on each, to be honest. So over 2 years, I saw a lot of pitching. I would say, look, you asked me what stood out. I mean, I think over those probably 8 or 9 agencies, the good things that stood out were, I think, first and foremost, like the research that went on our business and our challenges, and agencies they showed had a clear understanding of our business. Now, you might think, oh, your business isn't that complicated. But I think, movies come out in theatres. I don't work on that part of the business. My job is to make money from transactional. So my job is to get people to rent or buy movies before movies go to streaming. So it's not complicated, but, an agency actually needs to sit down and think about the specific part of the business that we work on, and therefore how we make our money and what are our revenue drivers. So not every agency did that. Not every agency took the time to really think about that. Maybe they themselves weren't people that rented or bought movies. They kept talking about streaming when we actually don't work on the streaming part of the business. So I think that was really important for us. The consumer first mindset was something that doesn't always come. You think, oh, that would come through, but that doesn't always come through. So I think that for us was really important as we were looking at it. The second thing would have been specific to these briefs, but I think in general, look, it was a balance of great creative solutions, but also commercial understanding, which I alluded to in the research, and then also just like a clear process and a way of working. It's no good if people come in and they're like, have the best ideas, but they don't reassure you that the people in the room are actually going to be the people that can cross the I's, dot the T's, deliver stuff on time, make sure that legal are on board and everything else. So we rated people pretty highly if they could show us that balance. Other good things that stood out were, this is pretty basic, but like really clever leave behinds, and not necessarily expensive, but just things that reminded us of who the people were in the room. And, not every agency did it, but there was a couple of agencies that did a really like simple, colourful sheet with the photos of the people that were in the room, what their names were and what they would be doing on the account. And maybe on the back of it was just in the case of Always On, was a really clear sort of diagram of how the process would work. And that was just sort of this A3 leave behind, which I think we all really appreciated.
Really interesting, actually. I'm on that point because it's a question that I often raise with agencies when they're asking me about their pitch documents in particular. And I'm always asking them to think about not just the collateral that they have in the room, that perhaps the visual support to their presentation isn't necessarily the same thing that you leave behind. Because presumably, as well as the people that are in the room from your team, I would imagine that there will be documents that will be circulated afterwards, and they need to stand up on their own without those people in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the people in the room probably were the people taking the decision, to be honest. But yeah, you're right. There was probably the big presentation, which frankly, I mean, I think you sit through, I would probably, like, more junior people probably would go through that again. So there's a big presentation on the screen. Some of them printed the whole thing out and gave us that. Other people had that and then emailed that to the decision makers afterwards. And then in the room, there was just like a simple sheet, which was a summary. Personally, I quite like the simple sheet that there was the summary.
Yeah.
Rather than the big deck. And then some followed up afterwards, with things on email afterwards.
Okay, interesting. What about some of the things that didn't work so well?
Well, you know what? It's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like some of these things that I've written down are pretty basic, but it's easier said than done, I guess. Do you know what I mean? When you're in it. So I look, some of these are the opposite of the things that were done well, but I wrote down not researching the business properly enough and understanding it. And there was definitely some people that didn't do that. I'm going to give you one example. Probably about 6 months ago, I got an email approach, which I don't normally respond to, but it was from a company that said that they could help us with voice activation and branding, getting your brand front and foremost in the voice activated space. And because at the moment, my whole team were in learning mode, trying to improve their skills because we're probably going to be applying for other jobs, I said, you know what, they offered us like a free half-an-hour call to evaluate and discuss our business and how they might be able to help. And I thought, I'll take the call. And I got my head of digital, head of comms, I think, and head of media onto the call. And so I gave them half an hour of everybody's time, and they came on the call. And it was a big deal to give them a call. And they came on the call and they hadn't even figured out what our business was and where we fitted. That whole thing about they didn't actually understand that we needed to make money from transactional and that we had different movies. It was interesting. It was a New York agency. The owner came on and thought he could do his usual spiel, and it was just impossible to understand what they do. And yeah, it was a waste of time. So I thought that was quite interesting because they sent an email and they actually got a call.
What a huge wasted opportunity.
Honestly, I was so cross because I'd been agency side and I thought exactly that. What a wasted opportunity. How hard is it to do emails and actually get the head of marketing and the core team on the phone cold? And then you come on the phone and you don't seem to be able to explain what you do in a way that is relevant to the people that you've decided to call. It was not good. The second thing I wanted to talk about was not bringing the right team to the pitch. Now, I know that obviously is a huge discussion in every agency about who is the right team. But, it was 9 different pitches I saw, and probably I'd say a third of them didn't bring the right people. So the obvious one is the team you want to have work on the actual business. So how many of the team that are going to work on the actual business are in the room? There are some that still didn't have all of those people in the room, that had a team that was sort of like the pitch team, just with the bigwigs. A non-diverse team, and I mean diverse from age, sex, ethnicity, appropriate for the business, bringing diverse views. We have very diverse content in general. When you work in the States as well, obviously, particularly in the States, is a very diverse consumer audience. And we definitely marked people down who didn't bring a diverse team. And then people whose skills weren't really up to presenting as well. Particularly, I think we wanted to do something quite groundbreaking in terms of the Always On. So we definitely wanted super smart, digital people. And some of those just weren't up to presenting. Other pitching mistakes, I've got a few here, Lucy.
Oh, good.
But the other one of the other ones was everyone around the table from the agency side feeling the need to answer the client's question. So when you get into that part of the pitch, which is going well, where the client starts asking questions, there was a couple of agencies where everyone felt they needed to pile on a bit of the answer, which we don't really need. I don't know if that happens. No. I don't know if that's something you've seen before, but I think, everyone's sort of on their best behavior, but everyone's, wanting to try and sound, intelligent and like they're helping the pitch, but sometimes it's just too much. Putting down existing agencies, I don't think that really goes down too well. And then not covering everything in the brief or acknowledging them. So, for example, ours is a global business. We were definitely pitching for an agency that could make sure that they could localize, or not localize, but just produce content that was globally relevant and that could handle that. And some agencies, when less prompted, didn't really sort of acknowledge that or talk about that in any great detail, which was definitely part of the brief. So they were all things that I thought might be interesting.
Really, really helpful. And as you say, I mean, you preface that list by saying, look, these are all basic things. But to be fair, you're a big client, and any of those agencies that were pitching for a substantial piece of work. So they shouldn't really be making the basic mistakes. And this is me being harsh, but the whole reason that we do this podcast is because none of these things are rocket science. It's just reminding people that we have to think about the seemingly small stuff, the seemingly basic stuff. But if they're the things that we're continually getting wrong, then that can make a big difference to how your agency grows. But conversely, if they're the things that you continually get right, then that's going to make the difference to how you continually grow.
Yeah, I think so. And, that whole being in the right team, because if you haven't got that, you're not going to have the chemistry. And then when it comes down to it, I mean, obviously you're going to evaluate on creativity, on the strategy, on whether, the agency look like they're operationally ready. But when it comes down to it, I don't know what factor is the chemistry, but a huge factor is the chemistry. And straight off the bat, if I walk into a room, for example, it's all men who've come from the agency, that's not a great initial reaction on my part. Or if it's all old, or it's all, anything, not just sex, as I said. I think you just want to see a mix.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm interested in so aside just from the kind of the new business approaches and the pitching, how the ongoing relationships work. And as you said, you've got a really big team that you're working with. And I would imagine day to day, their kind of liaison with the agencies. How involved do you get once the agency is sort of embedded and on an ongoing basis? How much sort of agency contact do you tend to have?
Do you know what? It depends on the agencies. Some, I think, are more focused than others on being aware that they could involve me, and if they involve me, I will turn up. So yeah, you're right. Day to day, completely handled by my direct reports. The things that I tend to attend are quarterly business updates, postmortems, if the agency is offering them, any one-off events, speaker series, which I can come on to and talk about. Apart from that, it's actually quite rare in the States that an agency tries to build a relationship with me. I find it quite interesting. I mean, I think the ones that do are the ones that are British or have like some Brits working for them.
So I'm wondering, Julia, do in terms of that ongoing relationship, do many agencies instigate any kind of client satisfaction program with you?
Do you know what? I have not had one agency formally do that.
Really?
Yes, really.
How would you respond to that if they did?
I think it would be fantastic. I'd give them a really honest feedback, either formally in a questionnaire or a phone call. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm wondering where else you can see agencies being able to add more value in that relationship, obviously beyond the delivery of consistently good work, but how else they can help build that relationship with you.
I think, obviously a good agency is a partner. And these days, I'm sure whatever client agencies are working with, those clients are going through, are working in industries that have been disrupted, not just media, but, specifically for us in media and entertainment, obviously our business is being massively disrupted, not just by what's obviously going on in the way that we market, but also just in what's going on in our core business of, the fact that, the streaming platforms have come along and essentially are offering content for, $9.99 a month, but essentially free. And we are trying to still get people to rent or buy movies. So I think, for me, agencies that can really understand like where the client is at and their needs at that appropriate time. can really add value. So for example, if it's a growth period and everything's going really well, it's, to be honest, it's as simple as more hands on deck, But, where I'm at the moment in a really competitive marketplace with a lot of disruption, what I really need is innovative, like new ideas to stand out. And we have this little mantra at work, which is Fox first. But, we really need agencies to help us stay ahead of the curve, to say, look, this is new technology. You could run a campaign on this platform. Have you thought about this? That's where they can add value. And then where we're at right now in terms of a merger, it's about an agency being a partner, understanding where we're at. My main preoccupation at the moment is actually team morale and retention. So in that scenario, like, how can an agency help me with that? And I thought it was interesting just to share that, in the last 18 months, I've really leaned heavily on our agency roster to help provide ongoing education to our team. I mean, I think, when you're in a situation where you're trying to not get everybody to leave in one go because they think the company's been bought and they might not have a job, what we've really been able to do is really, by getting the team to focus not just on their work, but on their own personal growth, we've been able to really retain most of our staff. And so what we've done is we said to our agency roster, look, how can you help us keep our teams current? And so we've had different agencies come in and talk about what's new and what's hot with social platforms, what's hot with voice activation, how do programmatic ad buys really work. Some agencies have brought in other clients who are advertisers like Snapchat. Another agency talked about how they motivated their staff to drive innovation. I mean, the list of topics is endless, and honestly, I've been open to any agency that would come in and give a talk on one of these topics. We've just basically had like a marketing speaker series. Honestly, I couldn't be happier about how many of our agencies have really stepped up in this situation to help us. It's made a real difference because internally we only have a certain amount of budget for training, and really this has sort of all come on top of our training budget really to help me with the team.
And I guess the lovely thing about that from the agency's perspective is that obviously there's the goodwill that brings, but also your team is so big that whatever happens, whether they stay or, in a year or 2 years' time, they end up moving on, they've still built great relationships with a great big team of people.
Exactly. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. By the time this merger is done, right now we're starting to lose some people. And, I've probably got people that are now working at every single one of the major studios, plus every single one of the main streaming platforms. So you're absolutely right. It'll be a very different network in a year's time across the industry.
I know working with lots of agencies right now who are trying to build up the courage to create speaker series and invite sort of senior clients to events. And I think it's going to be really useful to hear that insight for them, to give them a bit more confidence to get involved. And I think something also that you mentioned there about bringing in other clients, something that's cropped up quite a few times with agencies I've talked to. And actually when we're doing client satisfaction interviews, is that the clients don't hear enough about what the agencies are doing with their other clients. And there's a lot of value in that, understanding what else they're doing for other people and what's working well for other people. And I think sometimes there's a feeling that the client, you, won't be interested in hearing those case studies.
And it's completely the opposite, isn't it? Because every client feels like they spend far too much time on their own business, in their own bubble, and not enough time thinking about what people in other industries are doing. That is always my preoccupation. And I think it's definitely been the preoccupation of our team, like in a situation where they're thinking about going out and interviewing, and if you just spent, say, the last 6 years in entertainment and you've had your head down, you haven't been looking, say, at what people in FMCG have been doing, or travel, or automotive. If there's interesting tactics that have been put in place with a completely different sector, then that's great. And sometimes the only time you see that stuff is in a pitch situation, ironically, when clients come in and then talk about maybe a couple of case studies from their roster.
Excellent.
I think that's right.
Good stuff. Good advice.
And it doesn't have to be super formal, Lucy, either, does it? I don't. I mean, obviously, the speaker series, but speaker series are hard because then you've got to get people to leave or come for drinks or what have you. I think they've almost found it easier just to come in. We do it like in the morning. It's just an hour out of their day. They pop in. We have plenty of places where they can come in and present. And then, to your point, more of the team then get to hear. And we've been very democratic about having everybody from the whole of the marketing team able to attend any of these sessions.
Brilliant. I'm wondering where else you see opportunities for for agencies to win and retain business?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about business reviews, didn't we? Well, you talked about client satisfaction. I do think more check-ins and business reviews. I think it is easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and not to look back. I think we're worse. I think we're probably worse at it than the agencies, to be honest. But I think the agencies can push the client to do post-campaign reviews. And I think on the whole, it would be really welcomed, because I don't necessarily think the client themselves want to put the resource on it. And if the agency can do that, I think that's really valuable. In our business, definitely the media and the digital agencies are better than the creative agencies at doing this. I've never seen a creative agency. Not that I know exactly how that would be, but it could be just about the way the process worked, for instance, the number of rounds of revisions. Being really honest about how that campaign went from all aspects, I think would be valuable. I think checking in with senior management team like me on how the team are doing and what more I might need. As we said, I have a big team and I've got pretty senior people who are managing these agencies. So, I don't disempower them by really getting that involved in the day-to-day, as we said, but there's no harm in picking up the phone and calling me. I mean, I would always answer it. And, most of the time I will probably go to the person leading the account and say, how's it going, before responding. I think it's just another point of contact. The other area that I thought maybe might be interesting just to think about would be facilitating peer group discussions, which is I guess what you're sort of saying about the speaker series, but the speaker series is a bit more sort of maybe one way from the agency to a group of clients. I think in the States, they're really big on peer groups, CMO peer group and CFO peer groups, and they could be organized by independent companies or sometimes they may be organized by an agency. I actually think they're really useful. It's not my preference to go to those type of things, but when I have been to them, I've actually found them, if they've been structured in a certain way that you get to talk to peers in sort of a relaxed, informal setting, I think they can be really useful.
Outside of a more formal kind of conference scenario, I guess.
Yes, exactly. I mean, maybe sort of like guided discussion. I mean, I went to an interesting one recently, which I thought was fascinating, actually. And it was organised by a woman who's more of a coach, but an agency could definitely have organised it. She interviewed, it had little sections. So she did interview a couple of clients and talk to them about their career and their job and some challenges. But then there was another section where you could put up on a whiteboard what you needed and what you could offer. So it was quite good because it was like people were saying, well, I need, help with voice activation or really strong, like social creative. And then other people could put up, I could, this is what I can offer. I'm really good at this, or I have, my agency is very good at this. And it was just quite a different way. It was a different way of sort of bringing groups of people together, which was interesting.
I would love to know which book or TED Talk you would recommend to our listeners.
Right, so I've been trying to make a bit more of an effort recently to read a bit more, maybe because I'm in transition and I need to just get out of my bubble. So I'm going to recommend a book that was recommended to me by a friend, and it's called Deep Work, and it's by Cal Newport. I don't know, have you heard of this book? Have you read this book?
No.
So I'm a bit obsessed at the moment by how easily distracted I am by social media and just by busy work. It's the easiest thing in the world, isn't it, to go into work and I'm particularly, just do your emails and just, get distracted by all of that. And then, you have like a couple of important things to do, but how often do they just like get pushed down to the bottom of the list because there's other quicker things that you can get done. And so this book got a ton of ideas in this area, and I honestly can't say that I've implemented all of his recommendations, but what the book does do is it raises your awareness of the issue and forces you really to think about it. So he talks about giving yourself like a strict period of time to spend working, understanding that we have a finite amount of time for like deep work, as he calls it, like high quality work that actually requires focus. And it's just different techniques for trying to get us back to being able to properly concentrate on one thing. And even if it's an hour of intense concentration, he just talks about starting with what you want to achieve and scheduling that and thinking about the day in terms of that being the priority. And then the checking of the emails, etc., are the breaks. So rather than it being the other way around, which I think tends to happen for a lot of us. So he talks about like deep work and then shallow work. And it's just about trying to get you to think about recognizing or noticing your shallow work and trying to avoid it. I think there's a lot of truth in that I think anyone who's either running an agency, running a business, or would find useful.
I need to download this book immediately. I have I just recognise all of those scenarios that you've just described. And your point about actually trying to fit in the important work around the emails rather than the other way around is, I really recognise that.
Easier said than done, honestly.
Always easier said than done. Who's the author again?
Cal Newport. So Cal, C-A-L, Newport.
Brilliant. We will be giving away a copy of Deep Work to one of our lucky listeners. You know what to do. Just join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #SmallSparkTheory, and we will pick a winner and send a copy of Deep Work. Now, Julia, my very last question for you today, so I can let you get back to your busy day. I'd like to know, what's the best piece of advice you've been given in your career?
Sure, I thought quite a bit about this yesterday, Lucy. And I was like, I don't really think I couldn't really think of one piece of advice that someone had given me that I really thought I wanted to talk about. But what I did think was, I don't know, there's one thing that I alluded to at the start of this podcast, which I actually think has guided me. And that is that it's just really all about your network and maintaining your network and creating good relationships and not creating enemies along the way. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today in my career if it hadn't have been for the network that I created, when I was in my mid-20s. And to this day, that blows me away, because I think when I was in my mid-20s, I had no idea that the people that I worked for and some of the agency and some of the people that I worked with in agencies would be both colleagues, friends, and still agencies that I work with today, nearly 30 years later. Time spent at any stage in one's career just building those relationships, keeping those relationships, not in an overbearing, sometimes American salesy way, but just in a genuine way, will stand you in good stead.
I think that's brilliant advice. And I think a lot of it is not taking your network for granted as well, isn't it? And I think these days, particularly with LinkedIn, is a brilliant thing, because in some ways it can make it a lot easier. But at the same time, I think we can just be a little bit blasé about it. But I think it really genuinely not taking your network for granted and investing in your network is really important. So I love that advice. Thank you so much. And Julia, you've been absolutely a mine of information today. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
I have a feeling that maybe you may be having some voice activation agencies hot-footing their way to your door, having deeply researched your needs. So watch out for that. You're welcome. And yes, thank you so much. And we hope you have a brilliant week in Los Angeles. And we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. I really enjoyed it.
You have been listening to Small Spark Theory, brought to you by Gunpowder Consulting. Join in the conversation on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets using the hashtag #SmallSparkTheory. This podcast is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann, and produced and edited by Isabel Jarvis. Our music is provided by Duke Deck, available at dukedeck.com. For more information and to download further episodes, head to our blog at gunpowderconsulting.com. And if you've enjoyed listening to this episode, why not leave us a review? If you head to iTunes, you can leave us some stars, or if you really want to make our day, you can tell us why you love this podcast. Thanks for listening.